This is a Spotify dashboard in Power BI, which I'm going to use to showcase some advanced techniques. I'm going to show you how you can use ChatGPT to enrich your data using Python code, how you can use ChatGPT to make HTML visuals. I'm also going to show you how you can use PowerPoint to create this Glassmorphism background. Credits to the design goes to Ahmed, so check out his portfolio. This tutorial has a lot of steps, and all of the links are going to be in the description. However, I want you to know that in order to do a lot of these things, you will need a little bit of Power BI experience. I will try to explain everything in as much detail as I can, but if you want to know something like how to set up ChatGPT Code Interpreter, check out my other video which will explain exactly how to do it. With that, let's get started. The dataset that we're going to use is from Kaggle, and it's the most streamed Spotify songs of 2023. If you look in the page, there's a description of what the dataset is, some key features as in a data dictionary, and if you scroll down, you'll actually see that you can navigate through some of the columns. It's a CSV file, and all you have to do is click this button right here to download it. And if you look at it, it's got 24 columns and a whole bunch of different information, which is pretty nice. It's got track name, artist. And the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to try to use the ChatGPT Code Interpreter, which is now called the Advanced Data Analytics, to add the image URLs of the album cover so that I can use it in the report. The image URL for the album cover is what we're going to use to create this visual. It's a really nice touch of color, and I really think that it adds a lot to the report. To do this, I'm going to use ChatGPT's Code Interpreter, which is now called the Advanced Data Analytics. If you want to know how to set this up, I recommend checking out my other video, which will be linked in the description, about exactly how to set this up so that you can use it on your own. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to upload the CSV file and prompt ChatGPT to include a new column with image URLs of the song or album cover. ChatGPT had some issues with the dataset. It had some problems with decoding the Unicode, so I simply asked it to continue trying, and it managed to figure that on its own. Then it told me that it did not have access to the internet and therefore could not actually do what I requested by itself. So I asked it for some suggestions. It has two different approaches, one with placeholder URLs, but also one with Spotify Web API. I chose to use the Spotify Web API, and even though it couldn't actually do it itself because it simply doesn't have access to the internet, it could output the steps that I would need to take and the Python code that I would need to run in order to do so. I wanted everyone to be able to do this, so I asked ChatGPT to explain all of the steps, even if you've never used Python before. The first thing that you have to do is to install Python just from the organizational page that Python has. Just click download Python, and once you do, you need to run the installer, and this is very important. You need to make sure that you check something that says add Python to path. If you do not check this, you're going to have to reinstall Python. I uninstalled and reinstalled Python to show this to you. When you install Python, make sure to click this add python.exe to path. Once that's done, open your command prompt and copy and paste pip install request pandas into your command prompt. I've already done this, but basically this will make sure that you have the required pandas library installed. Next step is registering an app with Spotify to use the APIs for free. All you need to do is to visit developer.spotify.com, log in into Spotify. You might need to create an account if you don't have one. It's free, and once you do, you can create an application on your developer dashboard. It's going to ask you to fill in some things, but once you do, you're going to be able to actually find a client ID and a client secret for your application, which is exactly what's going to be used in the Python code. You'll actually be able to see the client ID and the client secret right here, and this is the code that you need to actually input your own client ID and client secret from the Spotify application that you've just created. It's all free, there's no need to worry about this, but you do need to have the client ID and secret yourself, otherwise this code will simply not run. So the last thing that you're going to want to do is to copy this code into a text editor like Notepad++ and then save it as a Python file. One thing to make sure is that the actual piece of code that's reading your file has the correct name of the file and has this specific encoding, ISO 8859-1. I don't know why, but if you don't include this, Python has some trouble reading the file. One last thing before running the code is to make sure that your CSV file and your Python script is in the same location. Now, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to the specific location. You can do this by typing in cd space in command prompt and the location of where all of your stuff is. And then once I'm there, I'm going to run a Python script by typing Python space the name of the script, which is Spotify script.py. And now we're just going to need to wait until it finishes. Now you might have to wait a second for it to complete, but once it does, you'll have a really nice Excel file, which will be the same as before, but with just one more column with the image URLs of the album cover art. Navigating to one of these shows that it is in fact cover art, which is really great. And now we can use it in our Power BI reports. But first, I'm going to start making the background that I want to use. For the background, we're just simply going to use PowerPoint. First thing I'm going to do is make sure that I remove everything, and I'm simply going to be using the designer function in order to try to get a nice background to start with. Like this one. So I'm going to select this one and I'm going to right click and click on format picture. Okay, I'm going to need to move myself a little bit. So what I'm going to do first is click on this button right here in order to color correct the actual image. So first thing that I'm going to do is make the saturation 0%, and that's going to make it very gray. And then what I'm going to do is click on picture corrections to make sure that the brightness is much lower so that it becomes almost black. And this is exactly what I'm looking for. You can of course play around with contrast if you want as well, and we'll leave it like that. Perfect. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to insert some shapes. Most of the shapes that I use are going to be rounded rectangles, and this is going to represent the canvas that I draw on. Make this, and then you can use this yellow dot here, and while clicking on it, you can move the corners to make it rounded or less rounded. And then what we're going to do is to make sure that the image itself is a gradient fill. And once it's a gradient fill, I like to make sure that the stops are somewhere just around the edges. And right now I have something that is both white, but the transparency is different. So the first one is 50% and the second one is 80%. And you can see that the 50% transparency is the one that is more white and the 80% is less white. You can do the same thing, but if you want this to be slightly darker, you can choose black and make it to be transparent. So if it's 80% black, you can see that there is some kind of transparency going on as well, but it's a lot more darker once the transparency happens. So we're just going to stick with white for now. And I'm going to make this 50%. And then what we need to do is simply go to not the fill, but the line, and we're going to make the line white. And the white line is also going to be a gradient line. And that means that if I do the same thing where I'm going to make the line 80% transparent and 50% transparent, maybe 20, you'll see that at the top there is now a white line, but at the bottom there isn't. So that indicates a kind of shine from above onto a glass surface. That is essentially what glassmorphism is, and I can do this multiple times in order to get a really cool effect. So I'm going to Control C, Control V. And you can see now with 2 layers, it becomes even wider. That's actually not what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of different, it's like areas that I probably will want to use. And I'm going to make them all black this time. And in this way, I can make the transparency something like 20% and maybe 60%. And I've created some, it's like overlays, which are still a little transparent, but this is starting to look a little bit more like what I want. I'm going to fast forward a little bit just to get a little bit of the alignment out of the way. If you want to see this being done in more detail, I recommend checking out this other video that I've made about gradients, alignment, and how to get this set up for yourself. I've made a couple of adjustments. Mainly, I've made the white background be 70 and 87% transparent, and I've made the regular boxes black and be 20% and 60% transparent. I've also added a title bar, which is just completely black, and we're going to add a Spotify icon. I also needed to crop it a little bit, but now it's starting to get somewhere. I'm also going to insert an icon for refresh. Let's take this one. I only needed one of those. And I'm going to make sure that it's white. Fantastic. I'm also probably going to want the Spotify name as well. And once again, I'm simply going to crop it in order to get the parts that I need, which is just the Spotify name on black. And there we go. This is almost everything, but one last thing is that I'm going to make this specific box green. So the way that I'm going to color it is I'm going to eyedrop onto this color, and then I'm going to eyedrop that color one more time. And I'm going to make these transparent. So I'm going to make this 80% transparent, and I'm going to make this maybe 10% transparent. If you want, you can move the angle around. So now I've moved the angle to 70 degrees. So now you can see it's coming on from this side, and there's a green gradient that is still very similar to the Spotify color. I can also change this by making this a little bit less transparent. Maybe, it's like 60%. And that looks good enough for me. And I'm going to save this into an image. And you can do that, of course, by either saving the whole file as a PDF, but you can also just Control A, select everything, right click, and save as picture. And I'm going to save it as a background. And the image is going to look great. So now we're going to get started with the Power BI content. The dataset's already been loaded in, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the canvas pixel size to 1080 by 1920. And then we're going to change the canvas background into what we made just now. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is to inspect our data set more closely. One thing is that I actually want to use dates, and I'm probably going to make a date calendar to use some time intelligence. However, I can see that there's no dates here. I'm going to take the easy way, and I'm just going to create a calculated column that will call dates. So I can see that in the data set itself, there are, in fact, information about the year, month, and day. And you can actually combine these together into a date column by using the date function. Date is equal to released year, month, and day. We're going to want to change this from a date time to a date and into a short date, because that's really what's preferred. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an external tool called Bravo in order to create a calendar table. This is something from SQL BI, and it's pretty great. You can just apply changes in order to create a calendar table that you can use and directly connect to your dates. In my first YouTube video, I actually talk about Bravo, how to install it, and how you can use it to create calendar tables for your Power BI reports. It's free. It's from SQL BI. I really recommend checking it out. Great. So first I'm going to make two charts. One's going to be the number of streams per track, and then it's going to be the number of tracks per release date. The release date is actually just the date that we've created because it's made from release day, month, and year. So that's not an issue, but we'll start with the streams per track. So I'm going to throw in the track name, and then I'm going to open the data in a new pane, and I'm going to throw in the number of streams. So if I throw both of these together, it immediately creates a bar chart, which is exactly what I want. And then I'm going to go with the other visual where I'm going to take the date from the date table. And then I'm going to, okay, so this is a little annoying. You do need to click open in a new pane most of the time. Nevertheless, with the date, I'm also going to throw in the track name, and that's going to be something that I modify into a line chart. And then the track name goes into the y-axis, and it immediately turns into the count of the tracks. So this essentially shows for each day how many tracks were released that are in this data set. We're also going to throw in a couple of slicers. We're going to put in the artist's name, the track name. We're going to put in the date itself and the actual year. So I've got all of these out. I'm going to change them all into slicers, and I'm going to put them into their locations. Now I want to add some KPI cards to represent data about the most played song. So in order to do this, the first thing that I have to do is create a new measure, which is going to identify what is the most played stream amount. This is going to be just using the max function. And I'm simply going to start making the KPI card. So let's throw in the track name. And then we're going to change this visual into a new card visual. And then once I do, I'm going to go back and I'm going to throw in the other parts that I want in here, which is going to be the artist name. It's going to be the number of artists that participated. It's going to be the date and the number of streams that this visual had. So if we take all of that, oh, I think I missed one. In order for me to show the most streamed song in this visual, I need to go to the visual filters, throw in streams, and I need to do not advanced filtering, but top and show items where it's the top one by value of maxed streams. So I'm going to apply this filter, and now it's going to actually show only the items which are the top streamed song. I added another KPI with the exact same filtering about acousticness, danceability, liveliness, speechiness, and valence, which are quantifiers of characteristics that relate to the song. I also wanted to show some context about how the top song performs versus the yearly average. So in order to do this, I needed to create a couple more measures. The top song streams, which simply calculates the sum of streams for the top song. So where the streams is the max possible streams. Then I needed another DAX measure to calculate the average streams per year. And in order to do this, I used calculate wrapping average streams, where I used the all except function, which is essentially removing all of the filters except the one that I've specified here, which is the year filter. Then I created a DAX measure to calculate the percentage difference. So it's the top song streams subtracted by the average streams per year divided by average streams per year. And finally, I created a DAX measure that is going to be formatted to include an up or a down arrow, depending on whether it's positive or negative. So I'm going to make both of these into KPI cards. The average stream per year is going to go here, and the top song versus average is going to go here. And now you can see what the arrow looks like. So this is really great for me so far, but I will need to format these later. Now, even though you could use the cover URL and just put it into a matrix to show them, that's not what we want. What we want is to have rounded corners. Now, it is a little bit of overkill, but to achieve this, we need to use the HTML. First, you're going to want to get HTML visuals into Power BI. So you're going to want to open the visual gallery and okay, I'm in the way. Scroll down and click on get more visuals. I already have it, but if you search HTML, you should find this one here. I like to use this one, which is, it's like from Daniel Marsh-Patrick. Simply add it and it'll be loaded into your Power BI report. Then from the visual gallery, you can simply select it and it'll create a visual that you can use with HTML text. So what I did next was I asked ChatGPT to write me some HTML code that would take an image URL and show the midsection with rounded corners in a 16:9 area. And I simply copied the code and I pasted it into Notepad. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to replace all of the quotation marks with a single quotation. So if you press Ctrl H, you can find all the quotations and change them to single notations. After you do this, I'm going to basically copy this and use this in my DAX code. So the DAX code that's going to make this all work basically starts with calculating which cover URL the top song actually has. So this is just the same template as we used before. The max of the cover URL is going to be where the number of streams is the max possible number of streams. Then once we declare this as a variable, which is just called X, we're going to put in one quotation and simply paste what we copied before and put in another quotation. Basically what this is because it's a double quotation, DAX recognizes this as text, which can be used as an HTML's SVG code. Now here in the code, there is something where it says your image URL here. I'm going to put in two quotations in between. I'm going to put in two ampersands, and then I'm going to put an X. If you've ever used Excel, you probably recognize what's happening here. I'm basically taking this text, splitting it in half, and throwing the X in between. Now I'm going to simply click OK. Now in the HTML visual, I'm simply going to click this DAX code, and there you have it. It simply works. ChatGPT does a really good job of outputting this HTML code. So if you actually look at it, you can even see that there is some places where it's got width, height, border radius indicated. So if you wanted to change the size, you could actually just change these values here. So let me try putting this to 400 and maybe 120. And you'll actually see the image has changed. So I'm probably going to mess about with this until it matches properly. You do realize that it has a, it's like white background, but that's actually a formatting issue. So if you actually take away the background, you'll see that it actually looks really great. And I just need to change it around a little bit in order for it to actually show the dimensions that I want it to. Now, the last two visuals, which are going in these empty spaces, is actually going to be made using DENEB. So I need to go into Visual Gallery and I need to go find more visuals. This is going to be DENEB, D-E-N-E-B. And I need to just click on this and add this to my report. So the DAX measure I'm going to show here is simply the average of the energy percentage, because I want to show within the selected years how much energy there is on average in each song. The first DENEB visual is going to be from David Backey's GitHub. It's the unit chart that looks like this. It's really nice. I love how it looks, but I actually had some problems getting it to work. I actually reached out to him and he showed me that he'd actually answered my exact question in Stack Overflow. I'll link all of this in the description, but essentially you just need to use this code from the Stack Overflow and it'll work just perfect for you. I'm going to basically copy all of this and I just need to change a couple of things. Right now, you can see that the color is like rainbow colored. I don't want that. I want this to be aligned with the Spotify green. So I need to go in and I need to change the fill values, the RGB values, which are all of these hashtags, into something that is more appropriate for my visualization. So in order to use this DENEB visual, first I need to go to the visual gallery and insert one of these images. I'm going to select the percent val, which I want to use in this visualization. And then now I'm going to click on the three buttons that say more options and hit edit. Once I do, it'll take me to create a new specification. I'm going to select Vega and I'm going to select empty. Once I do, I create this and I remove what exists there and I paste what I copied from the Stack Overflow. I'm going to scroll all the way up and I'm going to find where it says my measure. This is line 21 and I'm going to replace that with the name of my the measure that I'm going to use. You can actually see it right here, which is in the data view. It's called percent val. And now you can see that it looks great. But once again, the colors do need to be changed. First, I'm going to remove the background, which is line 6. And if I click again, now you can see it's white. There's no more of an actual background for it to be on. Then I'm going to go down and I'm going to make sure that the actual colors, which is going to be in the range here, 86 to 91, I believe. I'm going to change those into something that is more suited to what I would like to see. Now, I already have this written out. So now I'm going to go and replace these ranges with these two values. If I click on the apply, you'll now see that it's going from a dark green to a lighter green. I also probably want to do this for the actual color itself here. So in order to do that, I'm going to go down and find the text value. I'm going to copy one of these. And in the actual text, I'm going to be able to find here the text, which is line 176. There's a text gradient, and that text gradient itself is actually being called at the very top in line 9. So I can tell it to go from this color to, well, what did I have before? To this other color, these two colors. And if I click apply, now even the numbers itself is a gradient. So that's perfect for me. That's exactly what I want. I'm going to click back to report and you can see that now it looks pretty good. I want this one to be here. I'm going to make this a little bit outer. Now you can see there are, it's not perfect. There are some issues. It's white and it's hard to get the size right, but you can just go back into the code and make sure that you change the height and the width, which are also declared right here. So I can do 350, 350, and I'll remove the padding to 15. And there we go. I also do need to remove, the background, but Really great. That is kind of what I want. Maybe I might want to change the gray into something a little more prominent because it's kind of blending into the gray that I've used for this background. So in order to do this, I've gone back into the code and I've just changed where the arc is has a fill value. This is line 98, and I believe there's another one at line 157, and I've changed those to a lighter gray. And of course, I want to change the on target text into something else. That's line 203, and I'm going to call that energy percent, because that's what this value is. It's a value of how much energy there is in all of these songs. And I've also had to modify the, it's like size. I think right now I'm using 300 by 300, but that's all, and it looks great. Now the last visual that I'm going to create is a heat map with bars that's going to be made in DENEB. The actual KPI that I'm going to use for this visual is the number of tracks, simply because what this visual is trying to show is how many tracks were released on which day in which month to create a heat map. So first I'm going to make this DAX measure, and then I'm going to insert a DENEB visual. In this visual, I'm going to throw in the day of the week from the calendar table, the month, and of course this new DAX measure that I just created. Once I've selected those three, I'm going to click on the three buttons and click on edit. And then I'm going to navigate to this DENEB template website. It's going to be in the description, and it's the GitHub of Power BI Tips, which is run by another Microsoft MVP, Mike Carlo. You can actually see that this code am credited here as the author because I helped to write it. Simply copy the file, and then we're going to go back to Power BI, click on empty, click create, and then we're going to change the specification to be this value. The code does not recognize the track as the KPI that should be used. So you need to go down to line 41 and simply change this KPI to the name of your measure. I'm going to call it track here. And if I run this, it still doesn't work. This is honestly just a small issue with DENEB, so I need to go back and change the name once or twice. And then I'm going to click on edit. And once I do, if I get this edit specification field mapping pop-up, then I change the original field into what the name has been changed to, and I apply mapping, and it should show the visual right away. So that's it. I'm going to go back to report, and you can actually see a really nice heat map visual that shows exactly what I want. This is really good, but the visual still isn't perfect. There's some issues with the ordering. I might want to increase the length of the legend, and maybe I want to make the space a little bit bigger or smaller so that it fits better into my visual. In order to do this, I'm going to go back into the code editor. There's basically four things that I want to do. I want to get rid of this legend. I want to get rid of this label. I want to make the visual itself more compact but larger. And I need to order the dates. So let's start with the easiest one, which is dates. If I scroll down to line 110, I can actually see that the reason they're not being sorted is because they're actually case sensitive. So if I put in Monday, Tuesday, etc., then they will become ordered into, it's like the actual days, which is, it's like easy fix. And then I'm going to go down all the way to where it says, I believe this is line 169, and I'm going to make sure that the legend field here is just removed. So that's 178 to 169 and just replaced with null. And this should just take away the actual legend, which is great. I'm also going to go back and see if I can find time. Time title is right here in line 133. I'm just going to remove time, and there it is. It's gone. Now, the last thing that I need to do is to change the sizes of these visuals in order for them to be a little bit larger and fit the space that I've made for it. To do this, we're going to start from the top, and we're going to go down to where we see height. This is line 60. So I'm going to make this height into 40, and then I need to add a width. It's simply going to be, like declaring that the width is stepped at 30 pixels per bar. And what this is going to do is, as you can see, the top bar visual has increased. I'm going to keep going down until I find something that says hconcat. This is the rect, which is all of these little boxes inside. After the rect, I'm simply going to add in line 106. some more conditions making these boxes into size 30 by 30. This is exactly what I want, and I just need to do this for this last bar as well. So I'm going to make the width into 40, and I'm going to paste this again, and I'm going to make the height into 30. This is basically everything that I'm going to do to this DENEB visual, so we can go back to the report and see that it's actually perfect size for the space that I've made for it. Now we've done most of the hard work, but this visual still doesn't look like this. So I'm going to walk you through how to format everything so that you have something nice and clean looking like this. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the theme. So navigate to the theme by clicking on View and then this button right here, which is Themes. Click on Customize Current Theme, and we're going to change basically everything in here. The first thing to do is I'm actually going to find the Spotify player color palette, and I've got all of these values. I'm going to start inputting these into our theme. So I'm going to just click on this, go to the theme, set color 1 to be this value. These are hex codes which identify, it's like how much RGB there are. And I'm just going to keep going until I have a couple of these colors in. Great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the sentiment colors and the divergent colors into pre-selected ones that I've already taken out. And you can already see in the background that some things have changed, but we're not going to go there yet. I'm going to go to advanced in the name and colors, and I'm simply going to set everything to white. I'm not going to care too much about this because it's not the point of this design video. We're going to keep going, go to text and change everything to white. I'm going to make the title size 16, but everything else is just going to stay white. Once you go to visuals, there's only one thing you need to change, which is to make the transparency 100%. And that's it. I'm going to click apply, and already you can see it looks a lot better than it did before. There are still a couple of things that I do need to change, but we're going to get there in just a sec. Now we're going to change the formatting, so make sure that you have the format pane available, and we're going to start from the top with the slicers. The first thing that we have to do is to change all of these from slicer headers to titles. So you can see that the slicer header actually changes into smaller fonts if the visual is smaller. So if the visual is actually longer, then the actual text size of the date is bigger, but if it's smaller, then it shortens in size. To make this faster, I'm going to select all three slicers. This way you can, alter all of their properties at the same time. So I'm going to turn off the slider, turn off the slicer header, and turn on the title. So there we go, date, track, and artist. You might need to go inside and actually, write those out. And also I'm going to make the background color black. This is something that you're going to see in just a sec why. And for these two items, track and artist, I'm going to put the slicer settings and I'm going to put them as a drop down. So now you can see it looks really great and it's pretty nice. The year slicer here, however, I'm going to change them from the slicer settings from between to tile, because I'd like to see all of the different years in tile form, but I'm probably going to make this maybe gray, so the values might be, instead of being black, I'll make this slightly gray, maybe a darker gray. If you look at this, then you can actually see that there are gray outlines behind the slicers, and you can add those to the PowerPoint image, and that's probably the best place to do it. If you aren't going to do it in the PowerPoint, you can add them as shapes. Simply a rectangle, make the corners rounded, which is what I'm going to do. So very quickly, I'm going to insert a rounded rectangle, basically try to cover the approximate size that I want. Duplicate it 3 times. Cover up the artist, and by clicking on all 3, I can modify the size as I like. So I'm going to go to size and style. I'm going to simply make the width 250. I'm going to align them from top and then distribute them by searching for the line, distribute them horizontally. Then I'm going to go and change the shape style so that the rounded corners is 10%. I'm going to change the fill into a gray, a dark gray, and I'm going to remove the border. There we go. Then finally, I'm going to the selection pane, taking these 3 shapes and moving them to the bottom so that the order shows that they are at the very bottom. This isn't exactly perfect, so I can just click on these shapes again and move them a little bit so that they're more aligned with the actual filters. And there you go. One thing that I'd like to point out is that by changing the Power BI theme, we actually also changed the colors in the heat map. You might have noticed this already, but if I go into the actual code, you can see that where the colors are being called, it's using something called expression Power BI color with a specific number. This expression basically references the colors that are being used in the theme inside your DENEB code. So if you just change the theme, the colors change as well, which is really nice. So the next thing that we're going to do is to change these KPI cards so they look a little nicer. First, we have to change them from the existing KPI card into the new KPI card. And you'll actually see that it's having the same problem as these items here, which is that it is basically just not showing anything. It's a white box. The reason for this is, and I'm going to select all of these KPI cards because I'm just going to change them all at once, is that the cards have a border and a fill. And if I remove these, boom, you can actually start to see the values. Now, the next thing that I'm going to change is here for the actual cards. The callout is what I'm going to want to change. The callout and the label. The label itself is called average streams per year, but something's wrong. So it's not actually showing, what I'd like to be shown. It's showing something like this. So I'm just going to go and rename it average streams. There we go. So now you can actually see it's a little bit better. I might want to change the size of this, of the label, to 16, so it's a little bit more visible. And I'm going to move this tiny bit upwards. You can move these things around like I've been doing the whole video with just your arrow keys up and down, and that's basically how I do most of my formatting. Okay, so this is fine, and now I'm going to take this value, which is going to be something slightly different. First, I'm going to make the size a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to put the position in below value. So this is exactly what I'd like to do. Right now, I can't change the text here, but that's okay. I can actually just go into this and just click on call this top song versus average. One thing that should be noted is the values you can't really see very well, so I'm going to change this to 20, and now we have the context that I wanted to show. So this is the top song versus average and this is the average streams per year. So the top song is actually doing 620% better than the average streams. Fantastic. Let's add a little bit more to this. We're going to put in a conditional formatting for the color. And you can just go to the callout values, click on this FX button, put in conditional formatting, and we do have this exact value, which is going to be the top song versus average val. And this is going to be, if it's greater than 0, we're going to actually say that it's green, and if it's worse than 0, if it's lower than 0, we're going to make it red. And so now we see that at it's like this top song is doing 620% better. But if you select a song that's it's like considerably lower in streams, then it should show a red value. Yeah, okay. So that's exactly what's going on, and it's fantastic. I'm also going to go and not go to the values, but go to the labels and change the color formatting to be the exact same. And this way you can see that the top song versus average val is something that's actually shown pretty much perfectly, and it changes based on what you select. Great. Now we're going to take care of some small issues. One thing that I want you to know is that when I was making the theme, I put all of the colors as white. And because of this, you can't actually see the filter panel and you can't see tooltips. This is a little bit of a problem. So we're going to go back to view and change the current theme to change the advanced items, the first element items, to black. And honestly, this should solve most of the issues, so that you can actually see that with the tooltips, now you can see the text and the filters has these values. It's a little bit annoying, but it's just something that you have to think about. And because of that, I need to go back and I need to make sure that the values are white as well. And we're going to continue onwards in formatting the bar chart and the line chart. Honestly, there's really not that much you need to do here. I do want to take care of the axis. I don't really want the label for the axis, so I'm going to remove those, but I am going to make the values a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to put those values at 12. And then I'm going to change the title. The title is called Count a Track Name by Date, and we can call that something else like Track by Release Date. I'm also going to go into the x-axis and probably change the grid lines. Okay, it's not in the x-axis, there is a grid line section, and I'm simply going to turn off the vertical lines because I think this looks a lot cleaner. I'm going to do something similar for the bar charts. Basically, I'm just going to go and remove the labels. You don't need to know that it's the sum of the streams and the track name, because you can tell that from the title. And then the title is going to be the tracks by streams. I've also gone in and made the axis a little bit larger in terms of font. So I've made both the y-axis and the x-axis to be size 12. And that basically only leaves these KPI cards as the final thing that we need to format. So we're going to select both of these at the same time and simply work on formatting. Because they're both KPI cards, you can actually do this. First, I'm going to make this into size 17 and white. And then I'm going to put the text wrap into, I'm going to turn the text wrap off, and then I'm going to make it into a horizontal alignment. I might need to physically make these a little bit bigger, because you can see that some of the text is being cut off. And as for the label, I'm going to move it below the value and turn it into size 11. I wasn't selecting both of them there, so I'm going to just do the same here. Okay, so this is kind of what I want. And I also have to make sure that both of these items have the label not being text wrapped, so that you can see everything. There are some things that you might need to change, like you might need to go into these values and change each of the different fields so it shows, like, for example, track. Now that's something that I've done for both of these, and in order to make this just give it the final touch, I will probably only do one more thing, which is add a text box. And that text box is going to basically be what I use in order to fill in all of the notations. Now I could very easily do this in PowerPoint. I haven't, so I'm going to just show you, what I would put here. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this, and not going to do too much more to it. One final look, taking a look at what does exist and what doesn't exist. The album cover not showing and these items not existing means that there might not be a song in this time period. So I'm going to make sure that there's a filter on the year that's above 2017, so that when someone actually goes into this and it's like checks it, they can click it's like 2017 and above, and it will usually show some kind of visualization. And I also need to make sure that the filters have proper values, so the font color is white. Fantastic. And then the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is properly sized for the space that it has. That took a moment, but I just needed to change the width to 458, the height to 140, and the border radius to 15 pixels. And now it looks exactly like how I would like it to look, and it's perfect. There is one more thing that I could do, which is to add the text of the it's like track and the artist here, so that it looks like this. And I'm going to do this by copying this existing KPI card. I'm going to remove all of the items that I don't need, and then I'm going to simply format it so that it works for me. Going to the format pane, I'm going to go into the layout and make it into a vertical. I'm going to go into the cards, call out, remove the actual label, so it's only the values, and I'm going to see if I can remove the spacing down to 0 pixels. And this is pretty good. Blinding Lights Weekend, I can actually go to the specific series track, and I can go to the values, make sure that it's horizontally aligned, make this one a little bigger and a little thicker. It's pretty great. And I'll change the artist to be a little bit smaller, and also like this. You can actually tighten up the space a little bit more if you go to the card settings and make the padding to be 0 pixels above and 0 pixels below. If you're planning to upload this to the service, you need to add this one last bit, which is just including a clear all slicers button on top of this refresh button that we have here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to select, add a button to your report, clear all slicers, and we're going to take this and basically make sure that it covers this icon that we've created. The action is to just simply clear all slicers, and the button style is going to be, it's like have text and a border automatically. So just turn those off. And now if you click on this, it's going to refresh everything. So I'm going to just select, for example, maybe 2018, 2019. So I have these 3 items selected, and I'm going to click refresh, and it's just going to get rid of all of those. On that note, maybe I do need to make this, it's like the values black as a background so that you can actually see that they've been selected. Okay, so now I've got these here. If I select these items, then you can see that they've been selected. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that that's black, not gray. It's too similar to actually being selected and not selected. If you've stayed with me this far, I really hope you learned something. We've gone through DENEB, we've gone through HTML, we've gone through ChatGPT. If it's like make this, post it on LinkedIn, tag me. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Take care.